Caregivers play a pivotal role during end-of-life decision-making. While conversations about this topic can be very awkward for the care receiver, it is very important for caregivers to encourage this conversation. There are many factors involved with end-of-life decision-making, as well as right and wrong ways to handle it.
So now we're discussing factors that impact end-of-life decision-making. The main factors that impact end-of-life decision-making are as follows. End-of-life decision-making is not as simple as you may think it is. Many individuals actually think that end-of-life decision-making is merely the individual deciding what kind of care they want and other decisions that only can impact that individual. However, there are many other factors that need to be discussed that impact other audiences as well, such as family and close friends. The main factors that impact end-of-life decision-making is 1. Legal documentation, 2. Financial preparation, 3. Emotional preparation, 4. Place of care, 5. Type of care, 6 is life-sustaining treatment, 7 is death-hastening treatment, 8 is also post-death arrangements, 9 is physical, psychological, relational, and other ethical concerns. Considering this variety of these topics and the difficulty of the subject matter, there are definitely poor ways to handle end-of-life decision-making. Strategies as a caregiver can use in order to encourage beneficial end-of-life decision-making. So in the end, these must all be taken in consideration when choosing the end-of-life decision-making.
The biggest problem with end-of-life decision-making is simply that people just aren't talking about it. This is referred to as avoidance. Avoidance can take many forms. It can include the patient being uncomfortable with the subject matter, emotions preventing the conversation from happening productively, the caregiver not being able to talk about it properly, as well as other forms. A poor way to handle this situation from the caregiver's perspective is perpetrating the patient's hesitancy by avoiding discussing factors involved with end-of-life decision-making, focusing more on quantity of discussions rather than quality, and avoiding goal management strategies in an effort to avoid confrontation. I messed up.
In order to get the most out of end-of-life decision-making, there are 3 techniques that need to be considered. First, quality over quantity. The quality of talk is much more significant than the quantity of talk. The caregiver should be direct and the patient should be open to these conversations. 2, be aware of possible conflicting goals. Be open and to talking about these goals. This means that talk goals, identity goals, and relational goals should be openly discussed. End-of-life decision-making will only be effective if these goals are managed during the process. And lastly, don't wait. Many young adults have an idea that they are individuals and that these decisions don't need to be made until the future. However, it is important to begin thinking and talking about these factors early. Have you talked to your grandparents about this? Your parents? It's never too early to start thinking about what you want. Let your wishes be known and your family members. Discuss their wishes and develop a cohesive plan of action.
Conversations regarding end-of-life decision-making can be very awkward for both the caregiver and receiver when they are handled poorly. If the caregiver is more aware of how to handle these conversations and the patient is willing to converse with them, it can be very beneficial. Not only can it help relieve some of the emotional stress on the patient, but it can also help their family during the grieving process. As we have discussed, it is never too early to start thinking about having these conversations, yourself or with your family. If you don't have these conversations, then the end-of-life process is much more stressful for everyone.